Kayye. He's the founder of rAVe Publications, which is a great resource for all of the latest information in the AV and technology worlds. He's been live tweeting and taking photos, and he's doing a really great job documenting this event, getting around to every booth, which I hope that you guys do too. So give it up for Gary.
So did you come for the free lunch? Let's admit it. Well, we're really here. And, of course, the amazing stadium. I just went out and took a panorama photo. I just haven't figured out how I'm going to use it, but I know I'm definitely going to use it. You don't get to walk into a stadium very often, and you're the only one in there. So that's an unusual picture. If you have a chance to go out there and take a look, you should definitely do it. As Ashton just mentioned, my company is here, and we're shooting on behalf of AVI Systems. We're basically archiving everything that's here. So we're going to go around to every single table and shoot all the product pitches on all the 60 or so booths that are here, and all the presentations that will be made. Everything will be stored on this site here. So if you just go to ravepubs.com/AVILive, you'll go to a dedicated site that has news stories of all the products that they carry, but it'll also have this presentation live. For example, we're recording this now. We recorded the keynote earlier this morning. In addition to all the videos that we're shooting here on the show floor, all be on that site, and that site will live forever. We'll continue to do that as we go to Minneapolis and the other locations as well. And that's what Ashton was referring to earlier today as well. So this is a way for you to sort of see everything that you missed, and also for those of you who have business colleagues who wanted to come today and didn't get a chance to come, this is a way for them to kind of see a little bit. It's not the same experience, obviously. You don't get the free food and the free water and all that kind of stuff, but you do get a pretty decent experience. Now, a couple of things. Unfortunately, for those of you who are seated in the back, you're going to either want to move forward or do the best you can to see what I'm presenting, because we're actually presenting this actual presentation is going to be done in 4K. So I actually built this presentation natively in 4K, which is probably the first time you've ever seen a presentation actually given in 4K. And how did I do that? It's pretty easy. I use Apple Keynote, and all I did was go in and custom size the slide, which is a feature under the master slide feature in Keynote, and I put in 3840 by 2160, which is the native resolution of 4K, which you will learn here as we go through this today. And so all these slides are generated in 4K. Now, unfortunately, not every manufacturer, not every product photo is high resolution enough, so sometimes you'll see when I blow things up, they get a little bit grainy, but I do the best I can to get native 4K content. However, that also means that those 1080 monitors will not work because they can't handle 4K. So unfortunately, the presentation is here, and I don't even have a reference to what my current and next slide is like everybody else nicely has. But I kind of know my own presentation in general, so I'll do the best I can. And this is all about digital collaboration, because collaboration in the real world, as Brad Sousa said this morning, in the digital world should feel exactly the same. You should not have to change your workflow to actually collaborate in the digital world. We should adapt to the same workflow that you currently have as an industry, and that's the advantage of the technology and the products and the things that we have going on right now in our industry. And I'm going to talk about something called the perfect storm of technology today, because we have two things happening simultaneously that are sort of changing our industry that are going to benefit you in a big, big way. And I'm also going to talk about this concept of the digital canvas, for lack of a better term. This is a concept I coined about 4 or 5 years ago to describe what I saw coming in the industry, which is basically there's this sort of virtual canvas that exists that's giant, and we're only showing one piece of it whenever we project it or we show it on a monitor. We're only showing one piece of it. Instead of doing linear PowerPoint slides like what most people have historically presented, we are finding that people are brainstorming using current collaboration software products that have this giant virtual digital canvas. And that could be any product that you may use. It could be anything as simple as Slack to as complicated as a Cisco ecosystem, for that matter. And I wouldn't say they're necessarily complicated, but large infrastructure, enterprise-based systems. So that digital canvas, we're now able to leverage that inside of all the devices that we have available to us today, which we couldn't before, because before, all the presentation devices would only take the content linearly. So that's what we're going to basically, I'm going to kind of explain to you is how we're going to be able to move around that content as we move forward and what products make that available. The most important development in our industry's history is 4K. 4K is not 3D. It's not even 1080p. Moving from VGA and XGA and this lower resolution signals to HD was nothing compared to moving to 4K. And then we also have this sort of collaboration software storm happening simultaneously. So that's kind of the theme of where we're going to go with this today. And I'm going to kind of focus on those two things, 4K and collaboration. So the first thing I want to talk about is that perfect storm of what's going on. We have the perfect storm of a change in resolution and a change in light source, which we've never had before at the same exact time. And that kind of changes everything, because our change in resolution means that even in those little windows, whether it be a monitor or projector like this, 4K gives us 4 times the resolution of 1080, which gives us the ability to display everything natively simultaneously that we're generally going to use in a meeting. So instead of, for example, sizing things down or sizing things up to fit a screen, we can put a screen in as large as we want and then allow the customer to display their content in native resolution format simultaneously. So a PowerPoint presentation and a YouTube video and a website all up on the screen simultaneously in their native resolution without any resolution changing happening. That means that the configuration of a room totally changes, because now I can sit up very close to the screen and I'm not going to get any moire effect, I'm not going to get any dot pitch issues, I'm not going to have any resolution problems. So the configuration of a room is about to change, unlike you've ever had that ability to do before. Whereas before you'd have to say, well, no one really should be sitting closer than this, and our least favored viewer is how we build our room. Now we're not going to be building rooms that way. We're going to be building rooms to immerse people in the content. So the first thing is 4K. And 4K obviously brings some amazing image quality. So let's get that out of the way. Let's just show some of the image stuff that you can do with 4K that are just amazing, and we'll get past that, because even though image quality is just amazing, that's not the point of 4K in our world, and that's not the biggest advantage you're going to get out of it. So this is an actual photo taken with a Canon 5D using tilt shift photography. So that's actually makes it look like a model for that matter. This is a shot taken from a hotel in Las Vegas, obviously. Now, for those of you sitting in the front, you can see that you can read the names of all the hotels way down the strip there, which you couldn't do in 1080. I mean, we're literally dealing with a lot more resolution than we ever had before. This is a great, I'm a huge space buff. I volunteered to go to Mars. Don't think they're going to pick me because I'm too old, but I'm hoping that I still have a shot. And then, of course, in video, we're just going to be able to see detail that we've never been able to see before. So let's get that out of the way. We all know that 4K is going to be a jackpot in the consumer world. For example, anybody wanting better looking pictures and better looking television and better looking video is, of course, going to move to 4K. But that's only part of it. That's a very small part of the pie, the advantage of 4K. But to get to where we're going to go today, we need to talk about sort of the evolution of resolution, kind of getting beyond the hype of specs, how 4K is going to work in the Pro AV world and that digital canvas concept that I talked about, and that will bring us to where we're going to go. So how many of you remember 640 by 480 resolution? Remember that? Remember projectors being, believe it or not, there are still companies that make 640 by 480 projectors, mostly sold in K through 12, mostly in K through 6 environments. But of course, that is the native resolution of 640 by 480. What you're looking at right now on this 4K projector, that is 640 by 480. So imagine blowing that up to a screen, a 100-inch diagonal screen, what you're doing to those pixels. Of course you couldn't sit too close to the screen because you're blowing up, a bunch of little teeny squares, right? And so that created problems. And then, of course, as we moved up in resolution, HD was a little bit more than 4 times the resolution of VGA. 640 by 480 was known as VGA. And that also, of course, we had much higher resolution, right? We enjoy that higher resolution in our homes. I think all of you probably have 1080 televisions. How many of you have purchased 4K TVs in your house, for your house? A few of you. Unfortunately, I apologize. I'm about to tell you something you're not going to like about the fact that you bought those 4K TVs too early in the process for your house. Consumer 4K is very different than commercial 4K. That's why you don't use consumer 4K in a commercial environment. And I'll tell you why you probably shouldn't have bought that consumer 4K television just yet in just a minute. And then we have what's known as 2K, which is what the movie theater industry used to replace film in movie theaters. So about 90% of the movie theaters you go to have what's known as 2K resolution. About 10% have 4K resolution, but about 90% have 2K resolution, which is basically the same resolution as HD except a little wider. And that's because if you go in a movie theater, you notice the screen is a little wider than your TV. the idea behind that was there's two different competing groups here. There's the SMPTE, which is the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and then there's DCI, the Digital Cinema Initiative. SMPTE comes up with standards for consumer television. DCI comes up for standards for Hollywood. Hollywood said the peripheral vision of a human is not 16 by 9, it's slightly wider. So we're going to go with a slightly wider screen format. That's sort of how that came about. Then we had WXGA resolution standard, WQXGA resolution standard, which was driven mostly by Dell, and then 4K. So 4K is 3840 by 2160, which is what we're showing here on the screen on today. And of course, since the film industry couldn't do what the television and consumer industry was doing, they had to create their own version of 4K. So there are two different competing standards of 4K. There's 4K DCI, 4K UHD. You've probably seen the term or the labeling UHD on stuff before, and a lot of people use that term interchangeably, but now you're educated to know that those are not interchangeable terms. That 4K just means a lot of resolution, but the 4K HD is 3840 by 2160. 4K DCI is 4096 by 2160. Why does that matter? For example, guess who owns a big giant Hollywood studio and also makes consumer products and professional products? Sony, right? So of course all their 4K stuff is going to be a slightly different resolution than most everyone else's 4K stuff. So not that it makes a big deal, but it does matter when you're picking a screen aspect ratio, for example. So that's the first part of the perfect storm is resolution, right? Because in the case of what's happening is we have this evolution of resolution, or I would call it a revolution of resolution, where we're going from a resolution that we've had for about 10, 12 years to now one that is 4 times that, and even higher depending on which version you select, that brings us to much better colorimetry thanks to the light source improvements. That's the other part of the perfect storm. So two things are happening simultaneously. In our industry, we've never had two major innovations happen like this simultaneously. This is very unusual. Like, for example, we stepped up resolutions over the years, but we've been using the same lamp technology and the same backlighting technology and flat panel displays and lamp technology and projectors since the beginning, for the most part. So in the last 15, 20 years, not much has changed. Sure, in flat panels, we moved from fluorescent backlighting to LED backlighting, and that helped some. But that was not as big of a development as what we're going through now, where projectors are moving from all the traditional light technologies all to solid state technologies, with the most popular being what we're seeing here is laser based. Okay, and because of laser based technologies and other solid state technologies, we're going to have colorimetry like we've never had before, and this does actually matter. All right, and you may not realize how much it matters, but it does matter, and here's why it matters. I'm going to give you a little bit of a technical lesson, and I apologize if this is sort of like, to some of you looking at this, they're like, why do I need to know this and what difference does it make? I'm hopefully going to convince you that it was worth the 3 minutes that you took to listen to me on this. So there's this thing called D65. Anybody ever heard that term before, D65? How about the term 6500 Kelvin? Okay, so hands are going up. So there are 3 temperature scales in the world. There's Fahrenheit, which is what we use to figure out how hot or cold it is outside. There's Celsius, which is what they use most of the rest of the world. And then there's Kelvin. The Kelvin is color temperature. So when you watch a flame, you see that there's different colors inside the flame. Those are different color temperatures. So back in the 1930s, the television and movie industry got together and decided the white point, meaning what defined white, was going to be 6500 Kelvin. That's the temperature of white. Now, how many of you have noticed that when you have white things all together on a table, like you put a white sheet of paper on a white paper cloth and then you put a white napkin on there, they're not all the same shade of white? How many of you have noticed that before, that there's lots of different, okay. This matters big time. Why does it matter? How do you get white in the world of projection and in the world of display? How do I get the color white? Anybody want to raise their hand and tell me, how do I get white when I'm projecting? All colors. So white is 100% red, 100% green, 100% blue. If I illuminate all 3 colors 100%, I get white. Which means that if I turn off all 3 colors, I get what? Which means that every color in the world of projection and display is made from how good your black is and how good your white is. So if your white is shifted all over the place, every color is also shifted all over the place. That's why you have a customer, one of your colleagues will come in and say, why can't you make that look like my laptop screen? Because they're totally different lighting technologies. So the laptop screen was lit LED based, and this was maybe metal halide. And so they're totally different lighting technology, which means the white point is shifted in different location. Your consumer television at home is 9,300 Kelvin. It's very blue. So when you look at white images on your consumer television at home, it's very blue. Anybody want to tell me why that it's very blue? Why did they choose to make consumer television 9,300 Kelvin? Because humans like the blue color, the color blue. Look around. Look at the shirts you're wearing. Look how many of you are wearing blue. In 1937, they started putting blue dye in laundry detergent intentionally, because then when you wash something, if it had a little bit of blue dye in it, you thought of it as crisp, clean. So if I wash a white shirt and it comes out bluish, it's crisp and clean. If I wash a white shirt and it comes out reddish, it's pinkish. If I wash it and it comes out greenish, it's dirtyish. You see the difference? So they put blue dye in laundry detergent since 1937 because humans like the color blue. So if we lean towards blue, things look sharper and crisper to us. So consumer television is playing a trick on your eyes by doing that. But in the world of professional, we have to do color matching. So Coca-Cola, when they built the World of Coca-Cola Theater, the president of Coca-Cola said, that red better be Coca-Cola red. You can't do that when you're starting out with a white point of 9,300 Kelvin because we already have too much blue in the picture. So when we build professional displays, we start at 6,500 Kelvin. So that's the white point. And here's what happens. This is all the colors that exist. So if I could say this is all the colors that exist, this is called the Cie Color Curve, created in the 1930s to define color. All right? The middle of that, the middle of red, green, and blue, where they all come together, is the white point. So consumer television, they are giving you a white point over here. So white is actually there. That determines all colors. So that little black triangle that you see right here, how many of you have noticed when you take a picture with your phone or you take a picture with any camera and then you compare it with real life, it doesn't look exactly the same? Okay, that's a colorimetry issue. Resolution isn't the limiting factor there. It's colorimetry. Why? Your eyes have a limited resolution capability in the first place. The cameras in our cell phones now are higher resolution than the human eye can actually perceive. So if I put a 10 megapixel picture in front of you and a 13 megapixel picture, you cannot see the difference in resolution. You can see the difference in colorimetry. You can see the difference in color bit depth. And all this does matter. I'm getting to my point here. This does matter. So that black triangle right there is how much color the very best LCD projector, DLP projector, LCD monitor has shipped since today, up to today. That's how much color you've been able to capture. That's how much color you've been displaying in all the conference rooms, boardrooms, meeting rooms, classrooms, collaboration rooms, whatever. That's how much of that color you've actually been showing. Look how much color you haven't been showing. That's why that doesn't look like that. That's why the laptop screen doesn't because it has a different kind of color capability there as well. Here's what, so remember that whole curve represents what the human eye can perceive as color. Switch to laser and other solid state lighting like OLED, and here's what you get. Just by changing the light source, I'm going to grab more than 75% more colors. Higher than 75%, which means that what we were using before represented 25% of what we now have capability of representing by just switching our lighting technology. That doesn't even consider what happens when you also tap into the higher resolution at the same time. So this is the perfect storm because, of course, everyone's going to want to switch to 4K because all the lighting technologies are leveraging these higher color capabilities. And it is substantial, especially if you care about what the color is of something. And of course, if you don't have a reference, you may not care. But once you've been given a reference, of course you're going to care. Because once you see what you're missing, then it matters. And this matters in the long run as well. So, because of these technologies, it brings us something called HDR. How many of you have ever used the HDR function on your phone? Okay. Those of you in the back, you may not be able to see this first slide difference as well as those of you in the front will absolutely see it. We have a lot of ambient lighting in here. Thank goodness we have a 20,000 amps lumens projector, but we're all still limited in contrast ratio. The difference between black and white contrast ratio, the difference between black and white, the number of steps. So if I have a projector that has a 3,000 contrast ratio, it's 3,000 steps between black and white, which means that if I have one that has 12,000 contrast ratio, there's 12,000 steps between black and white times 3 colors gives us that much more colorimetry. So contrast ratio matters. So you add on HDR onto that and you get this. So this picture on the left was taken with an iPhone. Same time of day, 1 minute apart, HDR off on the left, HDR on the right. And when you first glance, you might think, there's not much difference there. Look at the sky. You can't even see the clouds on the left, the detail on the clouds on the left. And that might seem like a minor detail, depends on who you are. Are you in the biology department? Are you teaching graphic design? Are you in chemistry? What are you teaching? What matters? Who's deciding the colorimetry? Who's deciding the quality of the image? Is it somebody in marketing or somebody in engineering? Depends on who the customer is. The colorimetry matters. So the only difference there was turning HDR off and on an iPhone. Now, switch to a Canon 5D camera, and let's turn HDR off, HDR on. Same setup, 1 minute apart. Same tripod, same camera, HDR off on the left, HDR on the right. And what you see is and I didn't manipulate these at all. These are 4K images, not manipulated. This is just straight taken and displayed. What happens is you're missing information. So in addition to the colorimetry issue, you're actually seeing more information because of the bit depth, the depth of color. Gives you a perceived higher resolution because you're able to see more information. So of course the quality of the camera matters here in the difference. But look at the difference. This would have been a great picture had I not shown you that. And then you go, well, wow, there's a big difference there. So 4K, colorimetry, 2 giant things happening simultaneously. And so, of course, in the home world, this is a home run. Except if you already bought your 4K TV. Why? Because, unfortunately, the 4K TVs that have been on sale so far cannot display, and I don't want to get into too many technical details, the full colorimetry of HDR and all the benefits that you saw here because they are limited in their color bit depth to something that is known as 420 color bit depth. And what you want is 444 color bit depth. So you'll see that spec on a spec sheet. All the commercial stuff, for the most part, not all, most all the commercial stuff is 444 capable. Some of it is 420. All the consumer stuff shipping so far is 420. It may say it's capable of accepting 444, but it's converting the 444 down to 420 when it displays it in your house. Does that really matter? It depends on if you have a reference. So if you know what it's supposed to look like, you're seeing a colorimetry difference. If you're streaming Netflix, if your way of getting 4K is streaming Netflix, DirecTV, Xfinity, and stuff like that, doesn't matter. Your picture sucks anyway. So unless you're using native 4K stuff, think about what they're doing. They're taking this giant, all right, here, I'm going to give you the spec in case you wonder, 28 gigabit signal, uncompressed, into less than 100 megabit network, or maybe at best case a 1 gigabit network. We're compressing it 28 times its original. So yes, of course, we're messing with the signal there. So of course, in the home world, this is going to be a big deal, and sort of how we serve up 4K eventually will determine all that. But in the collaboration world, this becomes a big deal because that makes our canvas that much bigger. That means we can display more of the information that we haven't been able to display before. Now, up until now, in our world, collaboration has just meant BYOD, and that's way more than that. Thanks to products like Barco Clickshare. How many of you heard of the Barco Clickshare? It's a great example of a BYOD collaboration product, because what's cool about that is I can add a Clickshare to any system, and I can connect wirelessly. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about hack it into the network. I don't have to join some weird network Wi-Fi signal. I have to switch networks from where I'm at now. I don't have to worry about security of that. I just plug in this thing and I'm connected, okay? And there are other companies out there, and there's a few others on the show floor that have products like that are BYOD. But we're going to talk about more than BYOD because there's more to this than just simply wireless connectivity and simple connectivity. So in the world of huddle rooms, which is exploded, I mean, and this didn't happen in the AV side. Huddle rooms have been around for years and years and years. We just haven't had a product that addressed huddle rooms. And we're seeing huddle rooms, thank goodness we are doing it at the right time, because the explosion of huddle rooms is obvious. Like a typical company will have one, big company will have one boardroom, maybe 5 or 10 or 15 conference rooms, or they'll have 100 huddle spaces. So what counts as a huddle space? Meeting in the lobby, meeting at the water cooler, meeting in hallways, meeting in makeshift corners. We can now put collaboration boards in those spaces really inexpensively, really quickly, and give you access to that digital canvas at whatever resolution you want, at whatever colorimetry you want, very inexpensively, which we weren't able to do before. So huddle room applications, this becomes a big deal because now I can display 4 1080p. These are native. That's 1080p times 4 simultaneously. So I'm not changing the resolution. Most people don't build PowerPoint slides at 3840 by 2160. I only did this to make a point. I wouldn't recommend that. Number one, my laptop's going, oh my God, I can't handle this. It's like literally waiting for me to finish this presentation so that it can finish breathing or finish holding its breath. And I'm holding my breath, hoping that as I press my slides here, they actually go to the next slide, because my laptop has a Radeon R7 card, which is having a hard time generating this 4K content. But luckily, I'm literally 6 feet away from the projector, by the way. You cannot just switch out the display and expect all the other infrastructure to work, because all the stuff that you have was built on an infrastructure of what's known as HDMI 1.2, or maybe HDMI 1.4, and 4K requires HDMI 2.0, 2.1, and so on. So I have only a 6-foot cable because that's the longest distance 4K cable we could find that wasn't fiber optic to use this for this presentation. And my laptop, I had to reboot and just run Keynote, because if I opened anything else, it was going to say, I don't care, I'm freezing up. So this is basically how I'm running this presentation. So it does not like what I'm doing. But what's cool about this huddle space and these collaboration products that we've had up till now, like the Clickshare, is that we can also do all this wireless. You go downstairs, Barco, if you haven't seen, Barco has a new Clickshare called the CSE 800, which is 4K capable. So it's the exact same thing as what you have from the 200, except about 10 other features, and it's 4K. So it has 2 4K outputs, dual band wireless connectivity, a bunch of other stuff too. Of course, you have other companies out there that have that. Crestron with their Air Media product uses the same chipset technology that Barco uses. In fact, if you open it up, you'll see it's the same chip inside that Barco uses in there. So they're using the same technology inside the product. And then you have Extron with their ShareLink product. Same chip, basic chip technology that the Clickshare is using, but different infrastructure, right? It depends on if you're mostly Crestron or mostly Extron, or you don't have either. The Barco would work well, but if you're already using Crestron, you should use Crestron. If you're already using if you're already using Extron, you're probably going to use Extron, and so on and so forth. Barco has a sort of an upgraded version of that called WeConnect. It's aimed at higher education. I'm just going to flip through these because just showing you, Kramer has a product called VIA, which is like sort of like a simpler software-based version of. They have different levels, but the VIA Connect and the VIA Go are software-based versions of a Barco Clickshare type product, and all these represent simplification. Like that's all we're doing is trying to simplify the complexity of signal routing distribution for huddle spaces. Now, you can't just you don't want to take a boardroom and say, okay, we're going to make this a huddle space. You might want to add huddle capabilities into a boardroom so people can BYOD into something and you don't have to have an AV person there all the time. But of course, you're not going to run a boardroom as a huddle space. So what we're talking about is taking any space like we have here, hotel lobbies. It's becoming very popular in hotel lobbies to take the monitors they had sitting there for watching TV and turning them into huddle spaces for ad hoc meetings, and they can charge for that capability of doing that, or maybe make it a service to do something like that. So we're talking about simplifying. But we want to go beyond that. How many of you have thought about doing this? This is something that you can do thanks to the world of collaboration that you couldn't do before. Now, my bet is you haven't done this because no one's mentioned it to you, that you could do this, and 99.9% of the time, if you don't know something exists, you're probably not going to buy it. Would you agree with that? It's pretty logical. There's some people laughing, so some people got it, not everybody got it. So yes, if you don't know it exists, of course you're not going to do it. So everyone puts a projector in the front of a classroom. How many times have you been sitting in a presentation, or how many times have you given a presentation, or you've been in a presentation where the presenter went past the slide and you hadn't finished writing the notes? Wouldn't it be cool to have the last 6 slides projected on the walls of the room? Like, they don't need a screen. Of course Daylight wants you to buy a screen, but they don't need a screen. You can project it on the wall. Like, why not? And what? I hear somebody say, well, what about the color of the wall? Remember what I said. In the world of laser projection, we now have the ability to color correct anything. So I can project on any color wall and pull out that color and make it look like it's a white screen, almost. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for the last 6 slides that we were showing so that everyone in the room has the ability to stay caught up with the live presenter in the room itself. So think outside the box a little bit. You got to think outside of standard room design, because now we have this collaborative 4K technology that's going to take us to the next level, which is true collaboration. And remember, a lot of you are already using collaborative products that came from the software world that haven't married very well with the hardware world. And again, a great example of that is Skype for Business, right? That's a type of collaboration product that we haven't done so great at marrying with the software world. I'm putting on this video real quick to kind of show you an example of like this digital collaboration future that I see. This one company has this product that's a prepackaged product that does some of this stuff. I'm going to talk as it goes through the beginning of, like, they're talking about how in the analog world, this is how you actually work, but you couldn't work this way in the digital world because it was limited by the frame of the device that you were looking at. Wouldn't it be cool if you could take the exact same operation in the analog world and make it work in the digital world? And then they will demo this little product here. People are frustrated over this. So then they demonstrate this product. Oh, I'm so frustrated, I can't do this in the digital world. Oh my God, don't I wish I could do this in the digital world? And how do they do this in the digital world? Well, here's how they do it. They're projecting on every surface that is available to them, and they're showing the entire canvas. So instead of only showing a frame of the canvas, showing the entire canvas simultaneously. So it's all over the place. It's on the walls. It's on the floors. It's wherever we want it to be, because now we have projection technology that will allow us to project on anything, do color correction, give us the resolution. You couldn't do this in 1080 like you wanted to, because it wouldn't look that great potentially. I mean, it might look okay depending on what you're trying to do, but if you're trying to get lots of detail, handwritten notes and stuff to show up, that's going to be difficult to do. So we're moving more towards a world where environments are going to be more immersive, right? And that's ultimately where we want to go, where this stuff is sort of natural for us to use. Walk up and use experience. Brad Sousa mentioned that this morning. These touch panel systems are really cool, but if it's too complicated to use, I've just spent a whole lot of money on a really cool system that looks really cool, but isn't actually practically very cool because it's hard to use. And we're seeing this trend not only in the commercial world, we're seeing it in the consumer world. Here's a consumer product from Sony. You can go to Best Buy and buy today, and it turns any surface into a collaboration surface for gaming for the house. And you can also watch movies on it, and you can also do video conferencing with it, and you can also use it as a cookbook. Check this out. You just set it on the counter and you get your cookbook there. And like, this is a consumer product. It's only a couple $100 or a few $100 from Sony. It's shipping today if you're interested in that. So even the consumer world is talking about this sort of immersive and collaborative environment. And this is thanks to the new projection technologies that are out there. There's virtual gaming using that little box. Okay, another example of that in the consumer world is this. This is Microsoft new immersive gaming technology that they've got. Again, using projection technology, thanks to laser projection and these new developments in projection, you can play Xbox in a different way. If you look around the screen, the central core content is being sent to the screen, but look around the screen and now you've got a more immersive environment, and the two are connected simultaneously where the projector is projecting around it, and all of a sudden you're immersed in the environment at a level times 5 what you were before, so you actually feel a lot more immersive. That technology to do that, $299. All right, $299. So everything has changed thanks to where we are with all of this. And in the professional world, this is the vision of where our industry is going to be when it comes to command and control centers. The old way of doing command and control centers was video walls, just giant video walls, which does work, but puts somebody in a more immersive environment, and they're really completely in control because they're actually in immersive conditions. So instead of just looking at a flat display, I'm immersed in the display. In this case, they're controlling ships. So this is to demonstrate self-driving ship technology, which Rolls-Royce is bringing to market next year. So these big shipping containers. And this is how they're going to, this is their vision for how they're going to control it. So they're building these control rooms to be this way. And this is with the help of the same guy who did, who created the company Oblong, who also did Minority Report. You may recognize some of this conceptually out of the movie Minority Report. So of course this is using display technology. I mean, some of it is like wow factor stuff, but some of it, I mean, a lot of it is really, you know, capable of being done thanks to the resolution and this perfect storm of both resolution and colorimetry that we haven't had before. So that's kind of where we're moving from that standpoint. And if I can get my thing to go here. And that brings us to my digital canvas discussion, because right now in our world of canvases, we've been very linear. And what I mean by linear is slide 1, then slide 2, then slide 3, then slide 4, just like I'm presenting here. But what I want to be able to do, and where I would like to get, is I would like to get, even on a small level, I would like to get to know what you're saying about my presentation. And you're saying it in different ways. And you could be hashtagging AVILIVE, and I should be able to have that on this canvas simultaneous to when I'm presenting this canvas, but I'm limited by the linear function of Keynote. So as I move into more collaborative functionality, collaborative software products, which most enterprises have adopted different collaboration software products. You know, it could be anything from Slack, as I mentioned earlier, to something significantly more sophisticated like Bluescape or Prism's Visual Workplace, for example, downstairs. You should take a look at that. Then we have to match that with our ability to give you that canvas capabilities. So this means we're going to move into 4K everything. So it's not just going to be 4K in large imaging. It's going to be 4K in everything, because that way I have the ability to display anything on my canvas at any given time, even on those smaller display technologies. And that way, that gives us a more immersive experience. So instead of me just seeing this part of the image, I get to see all of the image and do whatever I want to do with it. How many of you have ever built a presentation in Prezi? That's a great example of an immersive presentation technology, except it doesn't work very well. That's the only problem with it, right? It locks up. If you put a video on it, it doesn't like that video. It'll basically lock up the video. And so the problem is it's an open source free product for the most part, and they're waiting for everybody else to sort of like adopt it. But of course, you know, everybody's like, well, PowerPoint and Keynote work good enough now. So we're going beyond just the presenter. We're talking about the workspace and making the workspace immersive. So for example, in this digital canvas concept, which is, as I mentioned to you, I started talking about 4 or 5 years ago, this would be an example of how I would build a room in the digital canvas world. So this is how you should be building your rooms. And again, 99.9% of you aren't doing rooms this way. Why? Because no one has told you you can do it. So yes, it is very possible that 90% of you would not build a room this way, but it's possible that 10% of you who see this would say, wow, that's interesting. Because of 4K technology, here's what I would do. So this classroom, the way this classroom is designed, in case you want to know the secrets of AV design, for those of you who don't know this, we design rooms, we figure out the size of the screen, the size of the image we have to put in the room based on the location of the least favored viewer, right? Because we want to make sure that our system is ADA compliant, and we also want to make sure the person in the back left and back right corner aren't going to complain about what they aren't or are not seeing. So we figure out how far away they are, and we have a formula for figuring out the height of the screen, which determines the width of the screen, right? Once we figure out the height, it determines the width. And we put a screen in. So if I were designing this room, and I was a typical AV designer, the screen would be the size of the slide that you're seeing there that says current slide. That is the size of the screen for that room. Forget about everything else. So if you saw a picture of this room, and it was designed by typical AV Integrator 101, the screen itself would be the size of the words current slide, that screen there. But if I put an immersive environment in and I put a 4K projector in, why not project on the entire wall? Why make the screen limited to that size? Sure, keep the PowerPoint slide to that size because that was the thing you were putting on the screen in the first place. But then when I switched to YouTube to show videos, why not just show the video and the slide at the same time and also show the previous slides at the same time too, so that the students in the room have everything on all the time. And you're thinking, this will overwhelm them. You think so? Go see what your kids are doing while they're studying at night. They're already multitasking in immersive environments. This is absolutely positively aimed at millennials. So if you're, I'm old like you, so I am also insulting myself. But if you're too old to understand the value of this, that might make it difficult for you. But if you're able to see outside of your own age demographic, which I admit that I'm in as well because I'm 51 years old, right? That I can't multitask that way. I can't play Xbox and listen to music and talk to someone at the same time. I can only play Xbox and barely play it because I can't hit all 9 buttons. I can only do 4 or 5 of the buttons. So my daughter can do 9 buttons, listening to music, talking to a friend at the same time. This is nothing for them. But we haven't had the technology to do this up until now. We haven't had a resolution capable of doing this. To do this in the current environment, in the past environment, we'd have to do this with 4 or 5 projectors. Right? That became expensive. Now, not as expensive as it used to be because the price of projectors has come down considerably. Like, think about how much the projectors were 10 years ago compared to now. I mean, it's amazing how fast everything has come down. But this would be how I would be designing rooms. Virtually project the clock on the room. Virtually project the background of the room if you don't want to have content up there other than the slide at any given time. But this is a real world. This is an actual room built with Prism Canvas or with a Prism Visual Workplace. Here's another room. This is an actual room where what we've done is built an immersive environment. So that digital canvas, sure, the major content is here. These are actual rooms, by the way. The major content is here. And then here's the past content, previous content, and other content, or whatever they want to put on there. All we're doing is using a video wall processor rather than a traditional matrix switcher to actually make this happen. Again, this is another view of the Prism product, which I assume they have some version of this downstairs. So it's a sort of I call it a canvas workspace. I don't know, they call it a visual workspace. But ultimately, you have this big, giant digital canvas, and I'm putting on whatever I want on it. But it doesn't have to be 16:9 aspect ratio or 4:3 aspect ratio just because that's how you're delivering slides. Decorate the screen with a clock and with a background or whatever Twitter feed, an Instagram feed, or whatever else that the people in the class want to see. Because I want to see what you're talking about. As I mentioned earlier, I want to see what you're saying about my presentation. I would love to have a Twitter feed up here of the hashtag AVILIVE so I'd be able to see what you're saying and you'd be able to see what you're saying live as you're saying it, as you're posting it on whatever social media you're posting. The world is changing. This whole collaborative world, this is how it's working. So we have to take our technology and adapt to the process that's already happening. And we haven't been able to do that as our industry because we've been stuck with rectangles up until now. We no longer are stuck with rectangles. So this is sort of the vision for the future classroom. Of course, this one will require 2 projectors because of the aspect ratio of the room, but 2 4K projectors in there, and I've got this kind of content cable as I can mask off whatever I'm not using. I still got a ton of resolution in there, and the students are not only more immersed, but they're also more informed, and the content is available all the time to them everywhere. And what's really cool about this, because you're using a network-connected processor, they can open up their laptop, they can open up their tablet or their phone, the phone screen's pretty small, and see the same content that you're presenting there off the network as well. How many of you realize that? This is all network-based. So now I can take whatever piece of content and make it available to the students. I can be streaming the live center screen, which is my PowerPoint presentation or whatever, to the tablet, to the gentleman sitting here, because maybe he or she has some limitations in being able to see that far away, and when he or she came to class, they had to sit in the back of the class. Or they had to miss class because they're sick and they can see class sitting in their dorm room and not miss class. They're actually seeing, and they're not getting exactly the same experience, but they're at least getting an experience, which they're not getting now when you have no connectivity outside the classroom. That's that whole thing that Brad Sousa was talking about earlier about that connectivity of the network. The fact that AVI systems can give you that ability to connect all this stuff and make it available to anybody at any given time is the key. Because that is real systems integration, not just building a room, not just building a conference room. Which leads me into the collaboration board. This is going to be huge. This is going to be huge. Because in the small huddle spaces, and these huddle spaces that exist, that digital canvas is available to you in a 50, 60, 70, 80-inch size by simply using a collaboration board. And these collaboration boards give you the ability to have that canvas, and all you're doing is swiping left and right or up and down to see the content. Of course, you can annotate on the content. You have the wireless connectivity or wired connectivity. You can collaboration, connectivity, everything. Whiteboarding, all of it is built into these products. And video conferencing, all built into these. You should go down, when you go downstairs, check them out. There's 6 or 7 vendors that have them here on the show floor. So some of the most popular ones to date, there's my word cloud that finally appeared. My laptop's saying, are you at the end yet? Are you close to the end yet? It's not liking this. Okay, of course, one of the first companies to have the collaboration board was the Sharp Aqueous. Does Sharp have the Aqueous here? Yep, okay. The Aqueous board. And then we have the New Line product, which, do you have New Line here? Yep, okay, good. So I should have looked up all the vendors before, but I'm getting a head nodding over here to make sure. Of course, the Cisco Spark board I talked about, if you're on the Spark platform, of course you're going to drop in a Cisco Spark board because then you don't have to re-engineer your collaboration software. And I know Cisco's here. And of course, we have, in this case, this is Avicor, which is a new company that's out there with a product. And then we have, these are just a few. This is the NEC Think Hub, which is a product that they built with T1V. But it's an all-integrated system. And then, of course, we have the Microsoft Surface Hub, which everybody knows because everybody knows Microsoft. And of course, if you're using Microsoft collaborative products, of course, you'd probably drop in a Microsoft product there as well. So that all this works into that digital canvas concept exactly the same way. And it's not limited to these big rooms that I've been showing you. You can do this with a small room too. So if you have a basic boardroom or conference room, I can turn that into a collaborative room. And in fact, with the new technologies, I can pixel map out the door and not project on the door, so that when the person walks in the door, they're not getting blinded by the light. I have the ability to pixel map out whatever I want and project on multiple surfaces that are not exactly flat, right? Because I have that capability built into there. And of course, in this room, I would have normally put a screen this size, but I can fill the wall with a projected image and make it more collaborative, even in small room applications like this. So think outside the box a little bit as far as that kind of goes. This is my sort of classroom of the future thing. Now, of course, this will take a little time because they don't have any money outside of that. Most K through 12 organizations don't have the kind of money to do this, but they want to do something like this. But this is sort of a vision of the future. And you'll notice that these tablets, these students have the pieces of content that the teacher selected from that to put here, right? And as opposed to everything. So the teacher's teaching with a digital canvas, but is giving access to the content linearly to the student, so that the student is learning linearly, because most students learn best that way. All the products out there have that capability thanks to their integration with the collaboration software products. So we do have a little bit of time for questions. We have about 10 minutes, depending on what level of questions that we get. And of course, my contact information, if you want to connect with me on Twitter or my company on Twitter, you can do that there. And we have these crowd mics, which, by the way, these things are meant to be thrown, but I'm afraid to get sued, so I'll ask your permission first. Did we have any questions out there about any of the kind of stuff we talked about, whether they be technology questions or applications questions that you might have? Nobody? Wow, this was easy. Yes. Hold on. Let them bring you the microphone. Hold on. They gotta bring you the microphone. They gotta make sure this is. You're supposed to be able to throw it. Somebody over here has to ask a question, so I get a chance to throw this. Okay?
How out do you think we are from having the multiple display video walls that you kind of are talking about here?
You're going to see 3 major companies at InfoComm in June that are coming out with products that are like dumbed down video wall processors specifically for these applications because of what I've been presenting over the last 6 months here with the digital canvas concept. Because you can do it now with a video wall processor, but of course a lot of them are $10,000 to $20,000. So what we need is a video wall processor that's like $1,500, and that's what you're going to see at InfoComm. The network-based video wall processors. Yep. So this year.
Somewhat related to that question is, there's a battle now between bigger screens or bigger projection or
good question.
more powerful projection systems.
Yeah.
And the return on investment is pretty different, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you
Good question. I think your question is related to direct view, display, flat screen versus projection, right? And whether that will happen. Okay, that's a really good question. So that's the advantage of partnering with somebody like AVI Systems that sells both, because right, they're going to win either way. The answer to the question is it depends on the space. You can't do immersion. You can't do immersion with a monitor unless you use lots of monitors. Then the other factor is the size. So if you're dealing with a small room where a 70-inch monitor is fine, then I put that in. But once you pass that 70-inch size, you're now 2 times to 3 times the price of a projector. So why aren't you putting in a projector? Especially now that we have interactive projectors. Is Epson here with the BrightLink Pro? Okay, Epson has the BrightLink Pro downstairs, which is an awesome collaboration board that's projected. It's a projection-based collaboration board. Price-wise, it kicks anybody's butt when it comes to that versus a flat screen. It's like literally 1/3 to 1/5 the price, and you get much larger screen from it, but it does all the same functionality. And you're going to see a follow-up version of that from Epson at InfoComm this year that even adds more collaborative capabilities. But so the factors are whether or not the environment calls for immersion, because in the world of immersion you've got to use projection, right? Or whether the environment can handle a small screen. How close are they sitting to the screen, and whether or not you can handle a small screen. So right now, the rule of thumb has been 70-inch and below, flat screen, anything above 70-inch projection. But I'm also seeing people put in projection in smaller environments because of the colorimetry issue. So now, a way to see that for yourself is look at these LCDs here. They're good. Now go look at the OLED downstairs in the LG booth, and you tell me which one you'd rather have in your meeting room. Because of the color, and by the way, I'm only picking on these because they're the same resolution. Now you go downstairs and look at LCDs that are LED backlit downstairs that are 4K, and you're not going to see something like what Samsung should have the QLED here. Look at that, and you're like, whoa, that's 4K. If you're looking at 1080p and you look at OLED versus LCD, you're going to be like, wow, I need OLED. So, another question? There's no perfect answer there. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. As I said, we're going to go shoot videos on all the stuff that's downstairs. You can go to ravepubs.com/AVILive, and of course, I'm sure that AVI Systems will follow up with you on how to get that information once you get going home. But tell your colleagues to come tomorrow because there's a lot more going on, and don't leave because she's going to give away free bear stuff. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I teach at the University of North Carolina, where your future franchise quarterback came from. You're going to be blown away at how good Mitch Strabinsky is. He is phenomenal. He's a great draft pick. We are totally excited to have him here in Chicago because I love Chicago. And I tweeted at him yesterday, here's your new home, and he was all excited about it. He loves Chicago too, and he's going to do great for you guys. So anyway, thank you for that.